Trials of the Enchanted Forge. The path to the Enchanted Forge was written in blood and legend. They say 1,000 warriors have climbed Mount Pyrathos seeking its power, and 1,000 warriors never returned. Their bones litter the mountain slopes, their armor rusted by eternal rain, their screams still echoing through the caverns below. But Kael Stormborn had no choice. The Shadow King's armies were marching, the cursed crown had awakened darkness across Eldoria, and the prophecy demanded a weapon forged in starfire. The exiled mage Theron had been clear. Only Aetherbane, the blade of the first kings, could wound the Shadow King. And Aetherbane waited at the heart of the Enchanted Forge, guarded by trials that tested not strength, but soul. 3 trials awaited any who dared. The trial of flames, where fire would burn away every lie. The trial of mirrors, where illusions would shatter the mind. And the trial of sacrifice, where the greatest price must be paid. Kael stood at the base of Mount Pyrathos as lightning split the crimson sky. Behind him, his companions waited. Lyra, the archer who'd sworn her bow to his cause, and Theron, the fallen knight seeking redemption. Before him, carved into the obsidian gates, were words in the ancient tongue, "Only the worthy shall pass. Only the broken shall be reforged." He pressed his palm to the cold stone. The mountain groaned, and the gates began to open. What Kael didn't know was that the trials had been waiting for him, specifically for him, for 500 years. The forge had a memory, and it remembered his bloodline. This is episode 5 of the Shadowed Kingdom, Trials of the Enchanted Forge. And not everyone will survive what comes next. The mountain had been watching them for 3 days. Kael felt its presence like a weight upon his shoulders, growing heavier with each mile they traveled north from Theron's ruined tower. Mount Pyrathos rose from the horizon like a broken fang, its peak perpetually shrouded in clouds the color of dried blood. Lightning flickered within those clouds, illuminating the mountain slopes in brief, violent flashes that revealed the true horror of what awaited them. Bones. Thousands of them. The slopes were littered with the remains of warriors who had sought the Enchanted Forge and failed. Armor rusted into the rock itself, swords frozen mid-thrust into the stone, skulls staring with empty sockets toward a destination none of them had reached. "The legends speak of 1,000 who tried," Lyra said, her voice tight as she surveyed the graveyard of ambition before them. "I always thought that was exaggeration. Storyteller's embellishment." Theron shook his head slowly, his scarred face grim. "Storytellers don't need to embellish the forge. The truth is terrible enough." They had made camp at the mountain's base, in the shadow of the obsidian gates that marked the entrance to the trials. The gates rose 40 feet into the ash-grey sky, carved with runes that seemed to shift and writhe when viewed from the corner of one's eye. At their center, rendered in stone that somehow still looked wet, was the image of a great forge with flames erupting upward, and above it, 3 symbols. A flame, a mirror, a broken heart. Kael had studied those symbols since they'd arrived at dusk. Now, as the twin moons began their slow ascent into the night sky, he felt the weight of what those symbols meant pressing down upon him like a physical force. "Tell me again," he said to Theron, who had served in the old king's court and knew the ancient stories better than most. "Tell me exactly what the trials demand." Theron poked at their small fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward into the darkness. The flames painted his face in orange and shadow, highlighting every scar he'd earned in battles he no longer spoke of. "The trial of flames comes first," he began, his voice taking on the cadence of recitation, of stories passed down through generations of knights. "Fire that burns not flesh, but fossard. Every lie you've told yourself, every mask you've worn, every truth you've buried, the flames will find them all. They say warriors have walked into that fire and emerged as hollow shells, their minds shattered by the weight of their own self-deceptions." Lyra pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders. "And the second trial. The trial of mirrors. You will see yourself, but not as you are, as you might be, as you fear to become, as you hope to be. The mirrors show every possible path your life could take, every choice and its consequence, every future that awaits depending on decisions not yet made. Those who lose themselves in the visions never find the way out. They wander the mirror halls forever, chasing reflections." "And the third?" Kael asked, though he already knew. He'd known since Theron had first spoken of the forge, since the old mage had looked at him with something that might have been pity and said the words that still echoed in his dreams. "The trial of sacrifice." Theron's voice dropped low. "No one knows exactly what it demands. The stories differ. Some say you must give up what you love most. Others say you must kill what you love most. Some claim the trial forces you to choose between the quest and everything else, between the weapon and your own humanity." He paused, and his eyes met Kael's across the flames. "Every account agrees on one thing. No one who completes the trial of sacrifice is ever the same afterward. Something is always lost. Something that can never be recovered." The fire crackled and popped, filling the heavy silence that followed. Kael rose to his feet and walked toward the obsidian gates, his boots crunching on gravel and bone fragments. This close, he could feel the power radiating from the stone, a hum that resonated in his chest and made his teeth ache. The rune seemed to pulse with an inner light that had nothing to do with the moons or stars. "Why me?" he murmured, the question he'd asked himself 1,000 times since this all began. Since the whispers in the whispering woods had called his name. Since the darkness had awakened and the prophecy had wrapped its chains around his life. Why does it have to be me? The mountain gave no answer, but as his palm pressed against the cold stone of the gates, he felt something, a tremor, a recognition, as if the mountain itself had been waiting for exactly this moment. For exactly him. "Because you are the last." Lyra's voice came from behind him. He hadn't heard her approach. "The last of the Stormborn bloodline. The last who carries the old magic in their veins. That's what Theron said, isn't it? The forge was built by your ancestors. It was always meant for you." Kael closed his eyes. "I never asked for this blood. This legacy. None of us ask for what we are." Lyra's hand found his arm, her grip warm and steady. "We only choose what we do with it." He opened his eyes and looked at her, really looked at her, for perhaps the first time since they'd met in the chaos of Eldoria's fall. She was beautiful, yes, but that wasn't what struck him now. It was the strength in her eyes, the unwavering certainty that had carried her through the loss of her homeland, her family, everything she'd ever known. "You should stay here," he said. "Both of you. The trials are mine to face." "No." The word came from both Lyra and Theron simultaneously. The knight had risen and was strapping on his sword belt, checking his armor with the methodical precision of a man who had prepared for battle more times than he could count. "The forge allows companions," Theron said. "The old texts are clear on this. Those who attempt the trials alone rarely succeed. The trials are designed to break a single soul, but bonds of loyalty, of love, of friendship, these can shore up a crumbling spirit, can anchor someone when the visions threaten to sweep them away. And if you fail, if you die in there because of me..." Lyra's smile was sad but unwavering. "Then we die in service of something greater than ourselves. There are worse fates, Kael Stormborn. I've seen them. I've buried friends who died for nothing, killed by the Shadow King's armies for no reason at all, their lives snuffed out simply because they existed. At least this death would have meaning." Kael looked between them, the archer and the knight, bound to him by circumstance and choice, ready to walk into a mountain that had killed 1,000 warriors and might well kill 1,000 more. "At dawn, then," he said finally. "We enter at dawn." None of them slept. They sat together around the dying fire, and Theron spoke of the old kingdom, of the days before the Shadow King had risen and the world had cracked. He told them of tournaments and festivals, of kings who were just and knights who were true. He told them of his own fall from grace, the mission he'd failed, the lives he hadn't saved, the shame that had driven him into exile. Lyra spoke of her village in the eastern forests, of parents who had taught her to hunt and a younger brother she'd failed to protect when the Shadow's armies came. She spoke of the arrow she'd put through the chest of the warlord who'd ordered the village burned, and of the hollow feeling that had filled her afterward, revenge accomplished, but emptiness remaining. And Kael, slowly, haltingly, spoke of things he had never shared with anyone. Of the father who had disappeared when Kael was 7, vanishing into the whispering woods and never returning. Of the mother who had died of fever 2 years later, whispering warnings about shadows and kings and prophecies he hadn't understood until far too late. Of the uncle who had raised him afterward, a hard man who had demanded perfection and provided criticism, shaping Kael into a warrior but never into a son. By the time the sky began to lighten from black to grey, they knew each other in ways they hadn't before. And somehow, that knowledge made what came next slightly less terrifying. The gates opened without resistance when Kael pressed both palms against them and spoke his true name. Not Kael, but the full name of his bloodline, the name that had been forbidden to him until Theron had revealed its power. Kael Stormborn, last scion of the Forge Kings, heir to the Flame Eternal. The obsidian parted like water, revealing a tunnel that descended into the heart of Mount Pyrathos. The walls were lined with crystals that pulsed with soft blue light, providing enough illumination to see but not enough to dispel the shadows that lurked in every corner. The air was warm and dry, carrying the scent of sulfur and something else, something metallic and ancient. They descended. The tunnel wound downward for what felt like hours, though time became slippery and uncertain in the mountain's depths. Sometimes they seemed to walk for only minutes before finding themselves miles below where they'd started. Other times, they would walk for an eternity only to look back and see the entrance still visible behind them, as if they'd made no progress at all. "The mountain plays with perception," Theron muttered after one particularly disorienting stretch. "Part of the trials, perhaps. Or just its nature." Finally, The tunnel opened into a vast cavern. At its center burned a wall of fire that stretched from floor to ceiling, flames dancing in colors that shouldn't exist. Purple and silver and black, interwoven with the more natural oranges and reds. The heat was intense but not unbearable, and as Kael approached, he could hear something within the flames. Whispers. "The trial of flames," Lyra said, her voice barely above a breath. "It's beautiful." "Beauty often masks danger," Theron warned. "Remember what it does. Not your flesh, your facades. Every lie will be burned away." Kael stepped closer. The whispers grew louder, and he could almost make out words. Promises. Accusations. The voices of everyone he'd ever disappointed, everyone he'd ever deceived, everyone whose trust he had betrayed in ways small and large. "I'll go first," he said. "If I don't emerge, find another way. Complete the quest without me." Kael. But he was already walking forward, and the flames rose up to meet him like an eager lover. The pain was immediate and everywhere. Not physical pain. Theron had been right about that, but something far worse. Every lie he'd ever told began to burn. He saw himself as a child, telling his mother he hadn't been crying when she found him after the other children's taunts. Lie. He'd been crying. He'd been terrified and alone and ashamed. "Little Stormborn," the Shadow King said. "Little heir to a dead bloodline. Do you really think a sword can save you? Do you really think anything can save you? I have lived for centuries. I have consumed kingdoms. I have broken heroes far greater than you will ever be." Kael stared into those eyes, voids of absolute darkness, windows into an abyss of ancient malice, and felt terror unlike anything the trial of flames had burned away. "Keep running toward your weapon, little king. I welcome the hope it gives you. Hope makes the despair all the sweeter when it finally comes." The Shadow King laughed, and the sound shattered the mirror into 1,000 fragments. Kael threw himself forward through the shower of glass, bursting through the archway and into the space beyond. The third trial waited. They stood on a platform of carved stone suspended over an abyss of churning fire and shadow. At the platform's center rose the Enchanted Forge itself, a structure of black iron and white flames, ancient beyond measuring, radiating power that made the air tremble. And within the heart of the forge, suspended in crystallized star fire, gleamed Aetherbane. The sword was beautiful in a way that transcended mere aesthetics. Its blade was silver that shimmered with inner light, inscribed with runes that seemed to tell a story in a language older than words. Its hilt was wrapped in leather that had once been something other than leather, dragon hide, perhaps, or the skin of something even more legendary. Looking at it, Kael felt something stir in his blood, a recognition that bypassed his mind and spoke directly to his soul. This sword had been forged for his bloodline. It had waited here for 500 years, patient and eternal, knowing that someday a Stormborn would come to claim it. But between Kael and the sword stood a figure. She appeared as if coalescing from the smoke and flame, a woman of impossible beauty and terrible presence, her form flickering between solid and ethereal. Her eyes were flames, her hair was shadow, and when she spoke, her voice was the crackle of the forge and the whisper of cooling steel. "Welcome, last son of Stormborn. I am the keeper of the forge. For 5 centuries I have waited for one worthy to claim Aetherbane. Many have come. All have failed the final trial. What must I do? Kael asked, his voice steady despite the fear pounding in his chest. The trial of sacrifice is simple. You must give up what you love most. Not in your mind. Truly. Permanently. The sacrifice must be real, or the sword will not release itself to you. Kael's mind raced. What did he love most? His life. His hope for the future. His gaze moved, almost against his will, to Lyra. The keeper smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Yes. You understand. The heart knows what the mind tries to deny. No. The word came from deep within him. I won't sacrifice her. I won't sacrifice either of them. There has to be another way. There is no other way. This is the trial. This is what it has always been. To wield a weapon of ultimate power, you must prove you are willing to pay the ultimate price. Lyra stepped forward, her face pale but resolved. Kael, if this is what it takes. No. He spun to face her, grabbing her shoulders. Don't. Don't you dare offer yourself for this. I didn't come here to trade lives. I came here to save them. Sometimes saving lives requires sacrifice. Theron's voice was quiet but steady. He had moved to stand beside the forge, his hand resting on his sword hilt. Let me be the one, Stormborn. My life is already stained. I've been seeking redemption for years. Perhaps this is how I finally find it. No. Kael's voice echoed across the abyss. Neither of you. I won't build my victory on your graves. I refuse. The keeper watched this exchange with ancient, patient eyes. The trial requires sacrifice. If none of you will offer yourselves, then you will all die here, and Aetherbane will wait for the next seeker. Perhaps in another century, someone will prove more willing. Kael stared at the sword, so close, radiating the power that could turn the tide of war. He thought of the Shadow King's armies, of the people he'd sworn to protect, of everything that would be lost if he walked away now. And then he thought of something Theron had said, back in the ruined tower. The greatest sacrifice is rarely what we expect. Sometimes, what we love most isn't a person, it's the image we hold of ourselves. Slowly, understanding dawned. You're right, Kael said to the keeper. The trial requires that I give up what I love most. But you never said it had to be a person. The keeper's eyes flickered. Explain. Kael walked to the edge of the platform and looked down into the churning chaos below. Then he looked up at the sword, at Aetherbane, the weapon that would make him a hero. What I love most, he said slowly, is the idea that I'm special, that I'm the chosen one, that my bloodline makes me worthy when others aren't, that I deserve to be the hero of this story simply because of an accident of birth. He turned to face the keeper, and his voice grew stronger. I give that up. All of it. I'm not special. I'm not the hero because of my blood. I'm the hero because I choose to be, because I'm willing to sacrifice and suffer and probably die for people I'll never meet. Any one of us could be standing here. Any one of the 1,000 warriors who died on those slopes had just as much right to that sword as I do. The only difference is that I made it through the trials, not because I'm a Stormborn, but because I was willing to let go of my lies, to face my fears, and to admit that I'm nothing more than a man trying to do the right thing." The keeper stared at him for a long moment. The flames of her eyes danced with something that might have been surprise, or curiosity, or approval. "In 500 years," she said finally, "no one has ever interpreted the trial that way." Kael's heart stopped. Is it enough?" The keeper smiled, and this time, the smile held warmth. "It is more than enough. The trial of sacrifice was never about blood or death. It was about humility. About surrendering the ego that would use Aetherbane's power for glory rather than justice. 1,000 warriors died because they could not let go of their pride, their certainty that they were chosen above all others." She gestured toward the forge, and the crystallized starfire began to crack and crumble. "You, Kael Stormborn, are the first to understand. You are worthy, not because of your bloodline, but despite it. Take the sword. It is yours."